Okay.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thanks all of you for being here.
Yeah, so wonderful.
Are you morning there?
Yeah, about 10.
So yeah, range of morning
yeah,
to midday.
9, 10, 11.
You're on Sunday morning, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I remember now.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We've got so many wonderful people from everywhere, New Zealand, Singapore, so across Southeast Asia, which is wonderful. I'm not quite sure. I think Raul might even be calling in from India. I don't know whether he's back in the country yet. So
excellent. Hello, Patrick. Hello, Kavita. Hello, Shelley. Hello, everyone else. Those are just folks I've talked to more recently. I talked to all of you recently, so nice to be back. Yeah.
My housemate Natalie is going to join us.
Good.
We have a whole room full of people here. Bernie, Marie, Arun, Vida.
Hello, Minnie, Bernie, Marie, Arun, Vida. Excellent. Before too long, I'm making plane reservations, not yet to your part of the world, but I'm on my way. So they're changing. Yeah, things are changing, except my housemate just got COVID and I'm not even at home. Except for that, everything is fine. We're having a huge, big thing and everybody's getting sick where I am. We've been so untouched and all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, everybody's getting sick. You know, you're following it. It's boring. Let's not talk about it. Okay. So.
Keisha was sharing to Facebook how COVID's allowing him to get his low B. I was sharing with him that when I get a throat cold, I can do a fantastic Tina Turner impression.
No, he did the most ridiculous recording because he was so pleased with himself because he had such a low voice. He wanted to preserve it. I said he looked more like he was having a feverish delusion, but nonetheless, he was still enjoying himself. But fortunately, he's recovered. It's fine. All right, my host, what would you like from me?
Oh, wonderful. So yeah, Asha hardly needs introduction, but we're really honoured to have you, Asha, and this side of the world, Southeast Asian. Really appreciative of your time and such a wonderful attunement. Every time I think of Swami and Master, even in this part of the country, your image always pops up, and it's such a beautiful time to have with us. And thank you for getting up your Saturday evening. I know you're locked in your room, and I'm sure there's plenty of things. But for those that don't know, we've put Asha's in the chat, Asha's website. If anyone needs to jump in and have a look at that, please feel free to. Asha's always inspiring everyone around the world. Asha's been one of the founding group of Ananda and founding members, not just in Ananda village, but Palo Alto and across the globe, and spent many years with Swami and written books and is well attuned to what's happening in the world. And as everyone here is aware, you have such a grounded, down-to-earth presence about you when you talk, and we're just so honoured. And it'd be great if we could have you lead a prayer, and then we'll have a little, or you can introduce the what we need to talk, or if you'd like me to, I can do that as well.
You better let me, because if you do it, it might be different than I'm going to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I never know. All right, why don't we start with a prayer? Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, Dear friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to open our hearts and our minds to your transforming presence, that we may live in this world in constant remembrance that we are not alone. We are not acting only on our own behalf, but we are your instruments here to serve. Help us to remain humble and kind, compassionate, aware that everything we do, however humble, however small, however grand, be permeated with your presence. Om, peace. Amen. Actually, I'm going to introduce it by just saying what you just said to me, Nora. Nora and Palamali we were talking just minutes before everyone else came in, and he was saying that the questions that everybody asks are the questions that everybody's asking right now, which is, wow, what is happening to the world? And where is it going? And what are we supposed to do about it? And how are we supposed to stay centered in the midst of all of this? And I found that every conversation that I've been in, either private conversation or satsangs, is all about this subject. You know, there's just not much we can do. I started today, early this morning. I spent an hour and a half with our group in Russia. They're having a retreat at the place that they have. And so I was talking to all of them. And you can imagine that's a part of the world that's in intense chaos at this point. And I was talking to them about a favorite idea that I had of us all being us, meaning the people who understand divine light on any level, not just our spiritual path, but all the people in the world who are working for goodness. That we're the nation of self-realization. And we are tourists in a lot of other places, but we're just tourists through, as Swami said once, tourists through time and space. That's all. And we have been assigned for reasons that we don't really know to somebody, which gave us a country, which gave us a culture and an ethnicity and a first language. But it's just an assignment. It's not on any level a self-definition. And of course, we're given an assignment that for one reason or another, suits the karma that we have. One of the residents, one of the founding members in America at Ananda Village was Uma McFarland. And she's from Manchester, England. And she lived in America for many years. Now she lives at Ananda Sisi. And she said something to Swami. She left Manchester when she was 18. She came to America, to the USA, and became an English nanny, if you want to just be a sort of a stereotype. So she was an English nanny in the US, and quickly, because of the way things work, then she became at least a green card, maybe finally a citizen. No, she's not a citizen because she's in Europe on her British passport. But she said something to Swamiji about having no attunement whatsoever with Manchester. So she asked the question, why was I born in Manchester? And he said, oh, it's obvious, so that you would have that wonderful accent and we could tease you about it for years and years. That was like, so there it is. Like, that's about how seriously he took the whole question. And some people think, well, there's cultural, what would you say, DNA, that's the word people use, or familial DNA and so on like that. But none of that is actually true. What there is karma. And there's karma, and karma is in the astral body. Karma is not in the physical body, because physical bodies come and go. If karma was just in the physical body, whoa, you could jettison the body and just wipe the slate clean, but no such luck. The karma's in the astral spine. It's vrittis in the chakras, and the chakras are non-physical. Someone wrote to me once that they'd had a hysterectomy and they were told they didn't have a second chakra anymore. And they wanted exercises to be able to, compensate. I just wrote back and said, wow, that was some surgeon. I don't know who would be able to do that. No, there's not a chance that any surgeon could take out your second chakra. They're a little confused. It's completely non-physical. It's non-gender. It's non-nationality. It's non-race. It's non-ethnicity. It's a vibration of consciousness. And we have a vibration of consciousness in the astral world. We're vibrating on a certain frequency, if you want to think of it like that. And then it's time for us to take a material body again. We take a material body because we have unresolved karma. We have restlessnesses. We have what Swami said, what causes us to reincarnate is longing and regret. There's something that we still long for. And this is not a sin to have longings and regrets. This is just the way we're made. We long for human love. We long for family. We long for home. We long for recognition. We long for friendship. We long for money. We long for health, fame, fortunes. And then we also long for service and beauty and art and many things. But we have these longings. And we're all just a bundle of unfulfilled longings. It's just the way we're made. And it's the way we need to be made, because those longings compel us into the experiences that we need in order to become free, to recognize that all longings are actually a longing for divine union. And when they all come to a focus in the one true longing that we have, then everything finally resolves. And then we also have regrets that just we carry guilt. Oh, if only I could have done that better. If only I knew then what I know now. If only I'd gotten there in time. If only I hadn't let my friend talk me into it. I mean, you know the story. I have them too. If only I'd been more sensitive. If only I'd listened when they'd spoke. And those things just, they're vibrations in the chakras, and they vibrate with a certain dimension of consciousness. And we're in the astral world, and folks who are like us, who have high aspirations, we get to go to nice astral worlds. And one of the nice things about the astral world, as I understand it, and as I intuitively believe without being able to see it, the material world is heterogeneous. And what that means is that many different vibrations inhabit the same physical space. So we're on planet Earth in the transition between Kali and Dwapara Yuga, which is not a particularly high age. And it's the material plane, and there's a lot of, mother's angelic children are here, and a lot of mother's naughty children are here. And we're all in this same place, just kind of working it out together, because that's the nature of the physical plane. In the astral world, you're only with your kindred spirits, which is one of the reasons why it's so rejuvenating. Especially if you're of refined nature as we are, where we get to be with spiritually minded, beauty-oriented, refined souls. And you don't have to protect yourself from the atmosphere then. You can just embrace it fully because it's entirely ours. So we come here because we have these restless longings, and we need material bodies to experience it. And we're there in the astral world. And we have a choice, Master said, of many planets. Swami asked, do we always come back to Earth? Master's response was, oh, no, just like, no, not at all. There's countless inhabited planets, he said. I even was reading recently that even the planets like the fiery suns, there's beings that live on fire and in burning gases. Who would have thunk? When I was in the 5th grade, my science teacher wrote on the board the conditions of life required for life, and said that these conditions only exist on planet Earth, and therefore there's no life on any other planet. I was 10, but I wasn't stupid. I raised my hand. I said, couldn't there be a life form that was adapted to other conditions? And my wonderful teacher said, no. And I thought, you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, my formal education was never notable, but that was really a classic moment. Like, who are you to teach me? What a total lack of imagination. So Master says, no, just the opposite. We can go to any planet. And so we get to choose what yuga. We get to choose whether or not Paramhansa Yogananda has recently taken birth on that planet, whether it's going to be a warlike zone or a peaceful zone. Master actually said, and this is how he put it, Lahiri Mahashaya was lucky because there was no war during his incarnation. Master said, already in my lifetime, there have been two world wars plus the Korean War. And for a master who's, attuned to the vibrations of the whole planet and feels everyone's consciousness as his own, to be in wartime is agonizing for them. All that suffering that they have to be constantly aware of. But Master, that was his assignment, was to come into a time in one lifetime where there were three wars, plus the Spanish flu, plus the economic depression, plus. And you think about good old Jesus, who incarnated in an age when he got to be crucified. I mean, talk about crazy times. But is it a curse or is it a blessing to be coming into times that are chaotic? We have this very strong idea in our minds, that the way God blesses us is he makes our lives easy. Good karma means pleasurable and not difficult. Bad karma means not so pleasurable and very challenging. So, but is good to be able just to cruise through and never have to really learn anything? Or is good when we're always on the edge of our seats with our holding on by our fingernails and just trying to get by? Which is good, which is not good. From the point of view of the soul and in the astral world, there's only one criteria, which is, are we expanding our consciousness? Are we overcoming our fears and replacing our fears with love? Beginning, middle, end of story. We are so involved in the details. And we decided to come in, and I think Master dragged us in. Master pulled Swami in with him, because Swami often comes when Master comes. And I think a lot of us come when Swami comes, or are being drawn into this family in the path. Toward the end of the path, one of the last chapters, Swami talks about these great, enormous spiritual families and how they have all this attractive energy, and how many souls are drawn to that power, either sub-families or the whole family. And over time, it becomes this gigantic star system, is sort of how he uses the phrase. He was using that phrase of spiritual family who have a shared destiny. And the destiny is set by the avatar. And Autobiography of a Yogi says, in the English edition of the original, is 291, page 291. I'm pretty sure that's the page. It's the chapter about Babaji. It says, Jesus and Babaji have planned the spiritual salvation of this age. And it says, they're very concerned about, and they refer to the complex implications of Western civilization, and how it's sort of taking over and not the best elements of it, and how they are working to inspire nations to give up war, racial hatred, violence, and a few other things. And I think we're here to help them. We're either here in a very explicit, direct relationship with Babaji and Jesus, and therefore with Master, perhaps with Swamiji, or we're here because sometime in the astral world, this little light ray went out, and it said, we need help, we need help, we need help. And somewhere inside of us, we recognized that to help be instruments of light at this time would also be to help our souls become instruments of light for all time. And Master was very explicit about catastrophic events, and Swamiji has written it up in a number of places. And when Swamiji used to come to visit us here in Palo Alto, and he would often come through and he would often give a talk, for years, he would only talk about Master's predictions for coming hard times. And we would just sort of sit there quietly and say, please talk about something else, inside ourselves. Please, sir, talk about something else. And it wouldn't be his entire topic, but there he would go again, just one more time, because Master, he'd heard Master, as he put it, thundering about pay attention to God now, because you're going to really need that strength. And Swami just had to tell us. How could he not? He would have been irresponsible not to. But he never told it to us in any way like it was a bad story. It was just the story that this is what's going to happen because we're here to help. And we need to set a new pattern for civilization. And as it happens right now, the nation of self-realization is as a minority group unrecognized by the UN, and we all have to carry these other passports, and we have to be allowed or disallowed to be in each other's countries. It's just a mess. And we all have to participate in a world that doesn't belong to us, that has rules that are not our rules. And the power, worldly power, is not in our hands. Our, meaning our collective essence. When I was getting very tired of early Dwapara, and I said something to Swami, sir, please, next time, wait till a higher yuga, because this is so tiresome. I remember Devarshi saying to me once, there was a movie theater and it was playing, I think it was playing the movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Is that actually a movie, or is that just like a joke title? Okay, anyway, he said, imagine a planet where they make movies like that. He said, and we're living on it. It's like, who would even think of such a planet? But here we are, because the people who have visible power, that's their consciousness. What can we say? They're Divine Mother's naughty children, and they're getting a chance to exercise their naughtiness. And their naughtiness is going to spill over and affect us. But on the other hand, by the grace of God, it's not our world. I mean, that world of duality, of power, of ego, of who can be violently more effective than somebody else, we may be touched by it. It's not that we'll be untouched by it, but we know something else. We are here for self-realization. And our self-realization is proved, let me phrase it differently. Our faith in God is developed when it's challenged. Living on this planet, especially, well, at all times, but especially at this time, is it's like going to the gym. And the only way that our spiritual muscles get built is if there's more and more weights on the machine. If you just put on the machine what you can already lift with ease, why would you spend all that time and money going to the gym? You have to put on it weights that you think you can't lift, and then you get to discover that you can. But think about your own life. I certainly think about mine this way. Every hard time that I've had to face, and no matter how grim and impossible it seemed, I've come out the other side. I've always learned something I could never have learned. I wish it were different. I wish I could say, oh, challenges, they're just a waste of time. We don't need challenges. We just need smooth sailing. But I have to admit that it seems to work. And each time I dip down through one of those, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death sort of moments, when I emerge on the other side, I'm much more of what I aspire to become. So what is good karma? What is bad karma? It's sort of a little hard to tell, isn't it? And more than that, what happens to us in this world doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that it's not important how we respond. We can't just disregard it. But in and of itself, it's the exercise machine in the gym. And it's the spiritual muscle that we develop. I was talking this morning, and I was remembering a story, and the details are not exactly clear. I think it was a Second World War story, and I think it was about Nazis, but it doesn't make any difference. It was an extremely oppressive, evil government, of which there are many. And the man and his wife and several children were dragged out of their apartment onto the sidewalk, and right in front of the man, his wife and his children were just murdered. This is true, right in front of him, just like that. And suddenly he's standing there utterly bereft of those he loves most in the world, being taken off to a horrible prison. And he realized that everything depended on what he did in that moment. And the way he said it was, he needed to be in every way the opposite of what was just inflicted upon him. And he absolutely resolved, because what he saw was hatred and unconcern and evil and sadism. And he had to become compassion and kindness and love and patience and service to all. And he lived for a number of years and lived through some horrific imprisonment. But every moment he knew that if he had to remain absolutely faithful to his commitment, otherwise his family would have died in vain. You see, it was in service to those who had died, was that he had to bring into the world the opposite reality. And, where you all live, Master remarked, he didn't speak of New Zealand, but he spoke of Australia. Swami said, when he was speaking of difficult times, he thought because your countries are more isolated, even though the world is interrelated, but your geographic isolation and your size, he thought you'll weather the storm better than some will. Some countries will, like living in the middle of Europe, for example. But nonetheless, we're all interconnected. We all feel each other's suffering. None of us live in the Ukraine right now, but none of us are immune to the suffering that's going on there. But even to observe suffering, is Divine Mother absent from that place? Is God not in charge? When I was suffering intensely once because people in my family were suffering, my spiritual family were suffering, people who were very close to me were suffering, and I just couldn't do anything about it. And I was having to carry the energy, the positive energy for a lot of people, and it just got to be too much for me. So I went off to a dark garage and sat in my car. Many a steering wheel has witnessed many an emotional breakdown in people's lives, I think. So I was doing that alone in a car, just crying my eyes out because of the suffering that I couldn't do anything about. And a voice came in my right ear, went through my brain, and came out my left ear. That's just how it felt, just like beetled through my brain. And it said, could this be happening outside the will of God? It wasn't a command. It was just a very interesting question. Could this be happening outside the will of God? Now, I've practiced when it's easier, which is a piece of advice Swami gave me, which is every time I react to something that happens, it react in a way that is not a response, but is a reaction, meaning a compulsive reaction. I ask myself, could this be happening outside the will of God? If this is the will of God, then how can I embrace it in some way? That doesn't mean I won't take action to mitigate the effect. It's not passive. Don't think this is passive. But I have to accept that this is the karma of the moment and then work intelligently with that karma. I can't just weep and wail. Well, let me phrase it differently. After I finish weeping and wailing, then I have to decide what I'm going to do. But in that case, it went like that. And I just stopped crying. I thought, well, if this is the will of God, then what are we supposed to do about it? And my response, actually, I've used it ever since. My response was, all right, maybe this is your will, but we're all getting pretty worn out here. And I myself, I don't have much left. And if this is your will, you're going to have to either, make this resolve itself or give me and everyone involved more strength than we have right now. And Master says you can talk very frankly to God. You don't have to be the least bit polite. You have to do something about this. And the prayer that came to me that I've used on myself and I've used to pray for others, whatever it is you're trying to teach us, Lord, help us to learn it. Because that's really why we're here, isn't it? We so often pray for things to stop. We always want things to be better, but we don't want to have to be different. So what we have to ask is, what are you trying to teach me and help me to learn it? Don't just leave me out here in misery. Whatever you're trying to teach me, help me to learn it. Whatever you're trying to teach them, help them to learn it. And then give me the strength to be helpful, whatever is needed there. And I think that's where we're going. I think we're all just going to have to learn to understand that the will of God is complicated. And it's perfectly fine for us to have an opinion. Even Jesus had opinions. Lord, let this cup pass from me. Lord, let this, whatever he said about the hour, save me from this hour. I mean, those are pretty big statements. Save me from this hour. Let this cup pass from me. But in both cases, afterwards, the next line is, but if this is what you want, this is what we'll do. For save me from this hour, he said, but for this hour was I born. Which is true of all of us. We spent millions of incarnations. It's horrible to think about how many millions of incarnations we've worked to get right here. You like to think you would be somewhere else, but where would you be? Everything, every ounce of our effort and of God's effort on our behalf has brought us right to this moment. For this hour were we born, which means it's perfect. It's perfect. Not that it's good, don't misunderstand me, but could this be happening outside the will of God? Even more than that, we participated in the decision to be here. We just don't remember. But we did. So for this hour was I born. And Lord, we said, when he preferred a different cup, he said, but thy will, not mine, be done. Because what do I know? I know what I want. And I don't like this. I've been very angry at the masters. At times, I just wish that I had a different karma. But the same sort of thing comes back to me. Honey, what did you expect? I mean, you've been spending all your life getting ready for this. So now you have it. So, and then give me the courage, whatever it is. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because the Lord is with me. And I think that's what we have to practice now. We have to practice all the time. When we're happy, when we're sad, when we're scared, when we're courageous, we are never alone. Never. It says in the autobiography, whoever says the name of Babaji, says the name of Babaji, that's pretty low bar. That's a very low bar, with devotion. So you can't just be saying it like a merchant, but with devotion, attracts an instant blessing. That's a very impressive promise. Master said, to those who think me near, I will be near. Master says, always keep the good company. The disciple says, what if I'm alone? Master says, am I not always with you? And of course, it's a rhetorical question. The answer, of course, he is. How often do we really concentrate on that simple fact? How often do we call upon that fact? And that's the only answer. We have no influence over the karma of our countries. We have no influence over the karma of our globe. It's long since set in motion. By the time it manifests on the physical plane, it's gone through the causal and the astral. The physical is the last, the material is the last expression. So it's all this energy that's long since been set in motion, but we have mastery over how we respond and what happens next. And what we really have mastery on, potential, is our own response and then the influence that we can have on those who are close to us. And Master made the interesting statement, all those who love God will be protected. I read it. I didn't hear him say it. I've never heard Swami speak of it at great length. I don't know what protected means. I don't know what else Master said. I don't know what context he said that in. But if he ever said it at all, protected, I think, means what Krishna said to Arjuna, my devotee is never lost. My devotee may live or die or have good fortune or bad, but my devotee is never lost. My devotee is always with me. All you have to do is say the name of Babaji with devotion and he sends us a blessing. Just meditate on that, on what that means, that you have the good karma to even know that that's true. Think how many people in the world don't know that. And if we're never alone, and if God and Guru and the angels are always with us, then why are we afraid? Ever. Why are we sad? Ever. Of course, I'm afraid and I'm sad. I'm not telling you something I've accomplished. I'm telling you how I try to solve the problem. Haridas, who was very funny, in addition to being a great saint, made up something he called Spy Dog. He was given to humorous things. Spy Dog was an acronym that meant solve problems in direction of God, which is, no matter how trivial the problem, try to solve it with Spy Dog, which is move closer to the divine truth. Just and let it become your mental habit. How could this be happening outside the will of God? Babaji, with a lot of devotion. Jesus and Master have planned the spiritual salvation of this age. Am I not always with you? Just whatever it might be, Lord, whatever you're trying to teach me, help me to learn it. Try to take every problem, no matter how trivial, even if you're just irritated with your coworker, or annoyed with your spouse or impatient with your child, solve the problem in direction of God. Because then it becomes a habit to pull your consciousness into divine awareness. And as the stakes get higher, either suddenly in an emergency or gradually as our planet begins to boil, then the habit of Spy Dog will be your habit. You'll cut a groove in your consciousness. Swami used to call it building spiritual power against troubled times. And it's well worth doing. And I think it's more like a clarion call now. We're going to need to do it either because our immediate environment will be jeopardized, or our hearts are going to begin to be very heavy because of suffering, perhaps not in our immediate household, but not very far from our door. And this is great. In all the hypnotic regressions that there have been, where people went back to anticipate this lifetime and to talk about the hard times that were coming, the unifying reality in all of them is that everybody said, I'm going into the most tumultuous, uncertain time on the planet. Isn't it great? What a fabulous opportunity. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to learn to lift weights that I didn't think I could lift. And I'm going to come out so strong. And of course, you'll always come out dead. You have to just know that. You'll never get out alive. So if we all go out, as Swami said once about nuclear war, he said, in 100 years, we'll all be dead. So if we dribble out one by one over the next century, or all leave together in one big explosion, he said, the instant you're out of your body, it doesn't matter at all. So all that matters is what we've done with our consciousness. Now, I know that's not easy, and I'm not being glib. I'm practicing Spy Dog. And I think that just the more we just look at it straight and find our upliftment from accepting the reality instead of hiding from it or trying to affirm it out of existence, I think the better off we'll be. So that's my cheerful, happy message on this, this Sunday morning. Yeah, and happy Sunday to all of you. Any questions or thoughts?
Wonderful, Asha. Thank you. Maybe if anyone's got any questions, if we just maybe pop it in the chat, and then we can just see if there's a collection of similar questions that sort of pop up with that. Give Asha a chance to rest her throat.
I'm fine. I'm just pouring a glass of water.
There we go, in the chat there.
I can't tell you how relaxing it is not to have to be translated. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
having it translated into Russian this morning and Italian the other day. And it's just so nice to be able to just talk and not have to stop. Okay, go on.
So Patrick and Natalie have asked whether you're aware or know about the remarkable shift in government consciousness in Australia recently.
I'm not very well informed. So all I can say is hallelujah, praise the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really wonderfully happy. There's no reason why people who are in power can't also be enlightened. It may be uncommon, but thank God it's not unknown. I'm particularly cynical right now because America's just going to hell in a handbasket. And it's very depressing for all of us to be watching it. but this world is dual. So if energy is rising somewhere else, that's wonderful. And Swami specifically said that he thought Australia would not be as severely affected as the rest of the world. Yes, he just thought there was dynamism and youth and independence and a lot of the right spirit that would really make a big difference. When we were having elections here at different times when Swami was living, he said, the leaders do not determine the karma of the country. The karma of the country decides who gets to be the leader. So it's even Master even said that Hitler was not personally responsible for what happened in Germany. It's not that he got off clean by any means, but he wasn't personally responsible. He was acting as an instrument of karma that was everybody's karma. And by contrast, he said that Stalin was personally responsible for the atrocities that he caused in Russia. So if the karma of Australia is good, better, then you'll get a leader who reflects your values. We've gotten some leaders in the USA who reflect the values of the country, or a part of the values of the country, the disintegrating values of the country. And Master said we'll come out of it, but if Australia can skip it, hallelujah, praise the Lord. It doesn't mean that the karma of the whole planet is shifted. It just means that light will triumph. And so there will be pockets of light everywhere. There have to be. And Swami always wanted Ananda in Australia, in the early 70s. The sequence was West Coast of the USA, East Coast of the USA, Europe, Australia, India. That was how he planned to develop. Australia never took hold, and so he went on to India. But it was always there, which is one of the reasons I'm talking to you. I'm trying to pick up the pieces that didn't get finished. So if you have a congenial government, all the better. It will make it easier for everyone.
Yeah.
But don't depend on it.
No.
Be grateful for it, but don't depend on it.
Yeah.
Because it could change in a heartbeat. There's these really dark trends blowing around the planet. So, be grateful and support it, but don't depend on it. Our power does not come from outside. But be very happy while you have it. Yeah.
We have two questions that just came in. One is kind of elaborating on what you were just speaking to from Bhakti. Let's see, how would you know more about government here?
Coming world. So I'll actually quite read it. So you mentioned what Swami had said about Australia and possibly New Zealand being perhaps not affected by the coming world troubles.
As much.
There is something being sorry.
There's too much interconnectedness to really drop out, but not as much. Right. Go ahead.
There is something being expressed that Australia and New Zealand are a part of a trial for rolling out communism around the world. Hopefully our new government is a little more genial, as you say. So I think that was possibly more of a statement if I'm reading it. So,
many people are interested in politics and government and so on, and it's a hobby. Everybody has hobbies. And Swami paid attention to world events. I pay a little bit of attention. I'm not interested per se, but I feel in my position I can't be ignorant either. But the main thing, and I guess the main thing is what I said before, don't get too excited, because this is a world of duality, and our purpose is not, it is not God's purpose to make heaven on earth. It's God's purpose to make an environment in which souls can attain enlightenment and have the experiences they need. And this planet is elevating, and there's no reason why Australia can't lead the way in some ways. But for devotees, just don't get too invested in it. You can be very interested in it. Many of my friends are very interested and very well informed. It doesn't make you less of a devotee. But if your heart begins to depend on it for security, for faith, that's where you just have to be conscious of where, it's the question of the first chakra. It's like, what makes me feel secure? Everybody has to feel secure. That's what the first chakra is. It's the earth chakra. It's where we find our security. And everybody has to find security. But if we try to find our security by anything ephemeral, and ephemeral is anything in the material world, because none of us get out alive. Any castle that we build that is based on the material manifestation of anything, sooner or later will have to be abandoned, and in all likelihood, sooner or later will disappoint us. Even if it doesn't turn rotten in and of itself, it simply cannot provide the level of security that the heart really wants. Only Dharma, only devotion to God can give us that level of security. So that's what we have to keep in balance. There's no harm in being interested. There's no harm in being optimistic. There's no harm in being politically active if you feel inclined to be so. But we have to do it as an opportunity to serve and to help others, not in the belief that we're finally going to get the right people in power and then everybody's going to be safe. Because it just won't happen. Next week, next year, next decade, the duality will shift again. That's not cynical, because it's just the way it is. And even if it's wonderful for the rest of our lifetimes, it won't be enough. And that's what we gradually learn. That's why experience gradually makes us free. It's not, for example, if we have a great love in our life, we have a wonderful sweetheart and we have a marvelous family and we make a beautiful home. We raise all our children, we take care of our parents, we do everything wonderfully and it all works for us. It's beautiful. It would be idiotic to say it's not beautiful. And as Swami put it once, we learn more. We learn from being disappointed and having our desires thwarted, but we learn more from having our desires fulfilled. Because if our desires are thwarted, we always imagine, if I only could have had it, then I would have been happy. And that's why we reincarnate. As Master put it once, it's not because it fails, it's because it almost works. And that's how Satan does it. It almost works. And so we think, if I just tweak it a little bit, I'll just come back and try it again. I'll be a little taller, a little more beautiful, a little more talented, or I'll get to marry so-and-so instead of his awful brother or whatever it might have been, then it'll be fine. So finally we get it all organized and we get exactly what we want. We have the absolute best that duality can give us. And then we realize, but it's not enough, because as St. Augustine said, the heart is restless until it finds its rest in God. But once we know, sort of like we can drink that cup to the bottom and know everything it has to offer, we no longer have an imaginary idea about it. This is wonderful, but there must be more. And so if you're interested in politics and want to see a good government and want to make a nice society and want to have legislation that you think is good and have enlightened leaders, hallelujah, let's have them. Why not? And it will give a certain amount of positive. It'd be foolish to say it won't, but it's still the material plane. When I said that to Swami about, can we wait till a higher age? Do we have to come back? He said, even in the highest age, he said, it's still the material plane. He just sort of shook his head like this. He said, but in the highest ages, people like us are in charge. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And so I said, so the whole world is like Ananda. He said, yes. But he said, but it's still the material plane. It's much more pleasant. There's war all the way up through Treta Yuga. We're in, Dwapara is the second, Treta is the third, Satya is the fourth. It's to the end of the third Yuga before war stops. And you can imagine, if people are still going to war, they're still complete idiots and morons. We're still living among Cretans. It might be less terrible, but it's still, it's not gonna do for us what our heart knows is our true destiny. So that's the balance. But we have to stay busy in this world, and we might as well find useful things to be interested in. There's no harm in it. Just keep it, in proportion in your head. Yeah.
And that's very helpful, I think, to keep in mind, especially as you were saying, creating the habits, the grooves in the brain that we want to approach this time and this consciousness on the planet with. And we had a question come in from Naraya, and it was just, again, about that, the proper right attitudes and the way to live in these times. And she's asking about how Master said we could pray unceasingly, call on Babaji, whatever that is. But if you have any things to share about what maybe you do, or, you know, Spy Dog was a great example.
Mhm. Well, starting with spy, I always try to solve the problem on the highest level, which is if somebody hurts my feelings, for example, I try to not just say, oh, that's all right. You know, I try to genuinely change my consciousness in regard to it, instead of just seeking a temporary fix. Even if I'm not able to, let me start over in another place. It's very important to be honest. You have to strike the right balance between humility, which is self-honesty, and holding a positive attitude. You can't just be always affirming a reality that isn't there. Swami says you have to start by recognizing what is. You know, if somebody that you love and trust has some very bad personality traits that are always going to be upsetting to you, there's no point in saying that they don't, because they do. And then you have to make the decision about, given this as the reality, what can I do about it? And if there's anything you can do in an outward way, one should try one's best to make circumstances better. To accept reality is not to settle down and die in it. It just means to begin with where you're beginning. If your leg is amputated, you can't just lie in bed and pretend that you have two legs and just periodically try to stand up and discover that you don't. You have to start from the fact that, something has happened and I only have one leg now. So how am I going to make a meaningful life with only one leg? Maybe the person that we married turned out to be a little different, or you married them at a particular time, and now who they have become is not exactly what you bargained for, but well, this is what I have. So how can I make the best of this? Maybe I'd hope to be richer at this point in my life. Maybe, you know, just all kinds of things. And maybe we'd hoped for a more peaceful transition. Maybe we'd hoped that the government would have been better than we thought it was going to be. Whatever it might be, self-honesty and courage in the face of the truth. Swamiji was brilliant, just beyond imagination of expectancy. He was so brilliant. And I realized he was brilliant because he was fearless. He just wanted to know what the truth was. And he was always very interested in what was true. He was very interested in what people felt, what people thought, what the government was doing. He was just interested in what is. And then once he knew what the basic reality of things were, to be positive was not to pretend they weren't there. To be positive was to work with what is to create something better. So I think the first thing we always have to work with is to not be afraid of the truth and not imagine that denying it is going to make it go away. It just is what it is. And interestingly, the definition of humility is self-honesty. So we just have to be really honest about ourselves. We have to be honest about our own limitations. You know, one of the children was being urged by his parent, his father, to be more generous-hearted towards some of the other children in the classroom he was mad at. And the little boy said to his dad, "Daddy, I don't want to be that good." It was just that, you know, it's all a good idea, but I'm not interested. And I have said to Master at different times, and Swami wrote to this one woman who complained about someone who was behaving very badly. Swami said, just try to be his friend. And the woman wrote back, his friend? I don't even want to be in the same room with him. You know, it was like, that sounds good, but I'm not interested. And Swami was very realistic when he told me to do something I couldn't do. And I said, sir, I can't do that. He said, so much for theory, let's work with reality. And then he just gave me something that I could reach. So I think the thing to do is to be honest about yourself, to be realistic about our capabilities, and to be utterly unashamed about who we are. Just, this is who I am. I can't be that good. I have to avoid so-and-so because I don't like them. Just like that. I don't like you, and I don't like to be close to you, and I can't be nice to you. So I'm going to avoid you. You don't have to say all that out loud, but you can say it to yourself. It's just like, I'm not that good. I can't handle it. I've navigated my whole life that way for many years. I know my limits, and I don't go past them because I can't. I don't have the strength. And as a consequence, it's easier to move. Now, you can't always avoid it. Sometimes your biggest problems share your room or share your home, or share your office. But even within that context, if you're honest, if you have self-honesty, then you can be dealing with reality. And, that a certain bluntness is, I find, very helpful. Those are just a few ideas. That's the self-honesty and honesty and openness with God and Guru, which I had to learn slowly. But I just finally realized, as Swami once said to me, you don't fool me anyway. Do you actually think when you put on a brave face to God that he's even slightly fooled? All you do is just completely prevent appropriate guidance because we've narrowed our channel down. And, we just all have our karma. It's no big deal. And not only God knows it, but everybody else knows it too. So what is the big effort?
Thank you. That's wonderful. And I'm sure there's many more questions. We're very honored, Asha, because you've given some more time to us, and I'm sure there are a few more questions. I think the questions that have been put in the chat, you've answered really well, and it's as always. But if everyone that's here is aware, Asha's going to visit us again in June. So if there's anything that's sort of been posed,
June 26th.
June 26th.
Our day.
For us. Same time, on June 26th. So if there is any questions that came up, or there's any sort of interest in that sort of as a group that we'd like to put forward to Asha, that'd be wonderful. And please, reach out and email us, or there's plenty of WhatsApp chats and anywhere to sort of reach out to us. But such a blessing to have you, Asha, and be over on this side of the world. And what do we say? This side of the ditch. The Southeast Asia, and it's it's beautiful having the energy again. Just, I know it's online, but just having the energy from around Singapore and Asia and New Zealand and right across the different spans of Australia. It's such a beautiful satsang to get together.
And true to your name, just giving us hope for navigating these times. It's a really important message for everyone these days.
We really have to band together, my friends, for this time where we're born. Whether or not things will hold together in your country and my country, somewhere on the planet, maybe we'll, it won't really be dramatic in our lifetimes, who knows? But we're setting a foundation of light. And upon that foundation of light, a new yoga will be built, and we came deliberately to do it. It's a very personal thing. It's not really building communities or doing all these other things, although we have to entertain ourselves, so we might as well try. But what really is happening is we are setting, everything starts on the causal, comes to the astral, and then finally manifests in the material world. So what happens in the material world, we have to work on it, but it's really our thoughts and the energy we put behind our thoughts, and then how we try to manifest them. But you can work on it just on the level of how can I serve and how can I love more? We don't have to, our lives don't have to show. It's not worldly evaluation that matters. It's just simply who we are. And often the most humble are the most divinely inspired. because of our consciousness. That is, to me, this is wonderful news, because therefore opportunity or lack of it, success or failure in this world, it matters, because it's a way of sort of getting feedback on what we're doing. But all that really matters is the vibrations we create, and far more than we are able to perceive. The vibrations that we emanate through our consciousness is actually the causative force in this planet. And we're doing great good for the world just by doing our best to love, even if we do it badly. The intention even creates wonderful magnetism. This is Mother Mary in Medjugorje, Sai Baba, others who've talked about difficulties destined for this planet are being mitigated. Not likely totally, but mitigated to some extent, because people like us are doing our best to live attuned to God. So we shouldn't think of that in terms of making us proud, because that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. But it should make us pleased to be part of a great wave of light that's coming over the world. We are part of that, for sure. So God bless you, my friends. And before too long, perhaps in person, and certainly in between online. Okay. God bless you all.
Thanks, Asha.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.